I sold my car last spring and bought a Harley, a 1998 Sportster in black, with just enough chrome to catch the sun. I wanted something simpler, something that didn't remind me of the man I had been before. I used to have a corner office in a law firm, but that life, along with the car, felt like it belonged to someone else now. The Harley was different. It was honest. No pretenses, no games, just the rumble of the engine and the open road ahead. It wasn't just the bike that had changed. I'd moved from the suburbs to this small apartment on the city's edge, trading in manicured lawns and friendly neighbors for the hum of traffic and the smell of exhaust. I got a job at a local bookstore, a far cry from my days as a lawyer, but there was comfort in the simplicity of it. I shelved books, managed inventory, and occasionally helped customers find something that spoke to them. I liked the work. It kept me busy and gave me time to think. Or more accurately, it kept me from thinking too much about Carol. Carol was my wife. Or rather, she had been my wife. We met in our 20s, fresh out of college, both of us wide-eyed and optimistic. She was smart, beautiful, and ambitious in a way that I found captivating. We married quickly, maybe too quickly. I loved her, or I thought I did. I suppose I still did, in a way, even after everything that happened. Even after the night that changed everything. We used to work in similar circles, me in law, her in finance. It made sense at the time. We were a power couple, the kind people looked at with envy. Two professionals with a promising future, climbing the ladder, making all the right moves. But beneath the surface, something was off. There were arguments, always small at first, about money, about time, about who was or wasn't pulling their weight. I dismissed them, chalked it up to the pressures of life. We were busy, stress was normal. I was good at lying to myself back then. I noticed the changes first in her eyes. She started looking through me instead of at me. She'd brush off my questions with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, make excuses for her late nights, blame work or a client dinner that ran late. And then there were the phone calls, hushed conversations I wasn't supposed to overhear. She'd hang up too quickly when I walked in. Once, I saw her delete a message the moment she thought I wasn't looking. A bad feeling started to take root in my gut, but I pushed it away. I told myself I was being paranoid. She was my wife, my partner. She'd never do something like that. Still, I couldn't shake it. Little things started to add up. The way she'd suddenly have to leave, citing urgent meetings that seemed to spring out of nowhere. The way she flinched when I tried to touch her, or how her phone never left her side. I'd find myself waking up in the middle of the night, glancing over to see her staring blankly at the ceiling, her face illuminated by the blue glow of her screen. When I asked, she'd say she was just catching up on emails, but something in her tone was always off, just enough to make my skin prickle. One evening, I came home earlier than usual. The lights were off, but I could hear her voice, low and hushed, whispering into her phone in the kitchen. I stood in the darkened hallway, listening, my heart pounding in my chest. She was talking to someone, her voice soft and almost tender. I heard a man's voice reply, but I couldn't make out the words. I felt my stomach twist, a cold sweat breaking out on my forehead. I didn't confront her that night. I couldn't. Instead, I waited. And so the days went on, the suspicion building inside me like a pressure cooker waiting to explode. I started coming home earlier, taking days off work and checking her phone when she was in the shower. I hated myself for it. I felt like a spy in my own marriage, a stranger in my own home, but I couldn't stop. I needed to know. And then there was that weekend, the one that set everything into motion. That weekend started like any other. The weather was unremarkable. Gray clouds hung low in the sky, threatening rain. Carol had been distant all week, even more than usual, and I could feel the tension simmering between us. It felt like the calm before a storm. I'd spent Friday night at the bar around the corner, nursing a beer, watching as couples chatted and laughed. I wondered how many of them had secrets, How many were living lies? I went home late, hoping she'd already be asleep, that we could both avoid another forced conversation. But Saturday morning, she was up before me, already dressed, her makeup done, her hair pinned neatly back, looking almost too put together for a lazy weekend morning. She smiled when I stumbled into the kitchen, but it didn't touch her eyes. "I have to go into the office today," she said, her tone casual, as if it were just another Saturday, just another weekend she needed to spend away from me. Something came up. I nodded, trying to keep my face neutral. "Okay. Anything urgent?" She paused just for a second too long, and I saw something flicker in her eyes, a flash of something like guilt or fear. "Just some reports that need reviewing," she said quickly. "It won't take long." I watched her walk out the door, my coffee growing cold in my hands. I could feel it in my bones. She was lying. I should have asked more questions, pushed harder, but I didn't. I just watched her leave, the door clicking shut behind her. I sat there for a long time, listening to the silence of the empty apartment, the sound of my own breath in the stillness. My mind was racing, thoughts spinning out of control. I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. I couldn't keep playing the fool. I decided to take a drive. The Harley roared to life beneath me, the vibrations traveling up through my hands, calming me somehow. I rode through the city streets, past the coffee shops and boutiques, trying to clear my head. I found myself outside her office building before I even realized where I was going. The parking lot was half empty. I saw her car, parked in its usual spot. But she wasn't inside. I knew the routines well enough. There were no lights on in the building, no signs of life. My heart pounded as I sat there, engine idling, staring at her car. What the hell was going on? I drove around for hours, thoughts bouncing around my skull like trapped bees. I couldn't go home. Not yet. I ended up at the bookstore, my safe haven, the place where I went to forget, to escape. But even there, I couldn't concentrate. I pretended to read, but the words swam in front of my eyes, my mind always returning to Carol, to the look in her eyes as she walked out the door. That flicker of guilt, that hesitation. What was she hiding? Around noon, I got a text from her. "Running late. Don't wait for me for lunch." I stared at the words on the screen, my stomach twisting. I knew then that I couldn't let this go. Not this time. I went home, took a shower, tried to calm myself, but the anxiety clawed at my chest. I needed a plan. I needed to know. So I waited, and I watched. I sat on the couch with the TV on, the volume low, but I didn't hear a word. My eyes kept darting to the clock, counting the minutes. Hours passed. Then, just after 4 p.m., I heard the sound of her car pulling into the driveway, the sound of her heels on the steps. The door creaked open, and she stepped inside, carrying herself with a careful, deliberate calm. "Hey," she said, her voice too bright, too cheerful. "I'm back. Sorry I was so late. Work was crazy." I smiled, nodded, played along. "Yeah, I bet. Busy day, huh?" She hesitated, just for a moment, then nodded. "Yeah, very busy." She walked past me to the bedroom, and I noticed a faint scent. Cologne. Not hers, not mine. Something unfamiliar. My heart rate picked up, my palms sweaty. I knew I couldn't confront her yet, not without more. I needed to be sure. Later that night, she was in the shower. I heard the water running, the sound of her humming softly, a tune I didn't recognize. I took a deep breath and slipped into the bedroom, moving quickly, quietly. I grabbed her phone from the nightstand, my hands trembling. The screen was locked, but I knew her password. I'd watched her enter it 100 times. I scrolled through her messages, looking for something, anything. Most were mundane, from friends or colleagues. I felt a strange sense of guilt, like I was the one committing a crime. And then I saw it. A message thread with a name I didn't recognize. Jason. My heart pounded in my chest as I opened it. The texts were brief, vague, filled with inside jokes and casual banter, but then I saw one from this morning. "Can't wait to see you today. Usual place?" My vision blurred as I scrolled further, messages piling up like stones in my stomach. There was no doubt, no more pretending. My wife was meeting someone else, today, right now. The usual place. I didn't even know what that meant. But I knew one thing. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. I put the phone back, slipped out of the room, my hands shaking, my mind racing. I had to figure out who this guy was. I had to know more. I needed to catch them in the act, to see it with my own eyes. No more games, no more lies. Tomorrow, I would find out the truth. One way or another. Sunday morning came, heavy with an uneasy calm. I barely slept the night before, my mind a whirl of questions, doubts, and images I couldn't shake. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them, Carol and this Jason, whoever he was, laughing, touching, sharing secrets I had no part in. I could feel something cracking inside me, something I'd held together for too long. I waited until Carol was up, moving around the kitchen, making coffee like it was any other Sunday. I watched her from the doorway, trying to act natural, trying to hide the storm brewing inside me. She glanced up and smiled, but there was something distant in her eyes, something I hadn't noticed before, or maybe something I'd refused to see. "You have any plans today?" I asked, leaning casually against the doorframe, trying to keep my voice steady. She hesitated, just for a moment, then turned back to the counter. "Nothing much," she said, her tone light, almost too light. "Might go for a run, maybe do some errands. What about you?" I shrugged. "I'm thinking about taking the bike out, maybe head up north for a bit. Clear my head." She nodded, her back still turned to me. "That sounds nice. You should go. Enjoy yourself." I watched her closely, the way she was too busy with the coffee machine, the way she didn't quite meet my eyes. She was hiding something. I knew it now. I could feel it in my bones. "Yeah," I said slowly. "Maybe I will." A plan was forming in my head, something dark and twisted, something that made my stomach turn. But I had to know. I couldn't keep living like this, in the shadows of doubt and suspicion. I needed to see it for myself, needed to catch them in the act. I grabbed my helmet and jacket and left the house without another word. But I didn't go far. I parked the Harley down the block out of sight and waited. My heart pounded in my chest, my palms slick with sweat. I tried to steady my breathing, tried to prepare myself for what I might see. Minutes ticked by, each one dragging like an eternity. Then, just as I was starting to wonder if I'd made a mistake, I saw her. Carol stepping out of the house, dressed too nicely for a run, her hair pulled back, her makeup done. She looked around nervously, then walked briskly to her car, her phone clutched tightly in her hand. I waited until she drove off, then followed at a distance, keeping to the side streets, keeping just out of sight. I was careful, deliberate, my eyes fixed on her car, my mind racing with possibilities. Where was she going? Who was she meeting? Was it him? After about 20 minutes, she turned onto a quiet side street, pulling into the parking lot of a small, nondescript motel. My heart sank. I knew then, with a sickening certainty, that I was right. I parked a few spots away, hidden by a cluster of trees, and watched as she got out of her car. She glanced around, then walked quickly to one of the rooms, knocking softly on the door. It opened almost immediately, and a man, Jason, I assumed, stood there, smiling, pulling her inside. I felt a rush of blood to my head, a wave of nausea washing over me. I sat there for a few minutes, my hands gripping the steering wheel, my breath coming in short, ragged gasps. I could see them through the small, thin curtains, their shadows moving together, their shapes merging. I wanted to look away, wanted to drive off to forget what I'd seen, but I couldn't. I had to know. I got out of the car, moving quietly, my footsteps silent on the gravel. I approached the window, my heart thudding in my chest, my hands trembling. I peered through a crack in the curtain and saw them. Carol was there, my wife of 8 years, wrapped in his arms. They were kissing, slowly at first, then with more urgency. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. My breath caught in my throat. I couldn't move, couldn't look away. She pushed him back onto the bed, straddling him, her hands running through his hair, her lips moving to his neck. I felt my knees go weak, my body shaking with a mix of anger and disbelief. My head was spinning, my vision blurring with tears I refused to let fall. I wanted to burst through the door, to drag her out, to scream at her, at him, to make them see what they'd done, how they'd destroyed everything. But I couldn't. I just stood there, frozen, watching as they undressed each other, as they tumbled into the bed, laughing softly, unaware of the storm raging just outside. They didn't care. They didn't know I was there, and that was what hurt the most. I felt my anger flare up, hot and blinding. I pulled out my phone, my hands shaking, and hit record. I filmed them, my breath catching in my throat as I watched them together, my mind screaming at me to stop, to leave, to run. But I stayed. I watched. I needed this. I needed proof. Proof for what? I didn't even know. Maybe to confront her. Maybe to show her just how far she'd fallen. Maybe just to hurt her like she'd hurt me. When I finally stopped recording, I felt empty, hollowed out, like there was nothing left inside me. I turned and walked back to my bike, my legs feeling like they could give way at any moment. I sat on the Harley, staring at the ground, trying to make sense of what I'd just seen, trying to calm the fire that was burning in my chest. I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't know if I could ever face her again, if I could ever forgive her, or even if I wanted to. All I knew was that everything had changed, that I could never go back to the way things were. But one thing was clear. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. I rode the Harley hard, the engine roaring beneath me like a beast set loose. The city blurred past in streaks of gray and brown, the wind tearing at my face, my eyes stinging from the cold air. I didn't know where I was going. I just needed to move. Needed to feel the anger in my veins cool, even if just a little. My hands were clenched tight on the handlebars, knuckles white, and my heart hammered against my ribs. I replayed the scene over and over in my head. Carol, my wife, in another man's arms, in a dingy motel room where I'd never imagined she'd be. How could she? After everything we'd been through, after all the promises, the dreams we'd built together, how could she betray me like that? I felt the anger rise again, red and hot, flooding my chest. I wanted to scream, to hit something, to tear apart everything in my path. But there was also a new emotion creeping in alongside the rage, a cold, calculating clarity. I needed to think. I needed to plan. I couldn't just sit back and let this go. I had to do something. I had to make them pay. The Harley finally came to a stop outside my apartment. I stumbled off, legs numb, my head buzzing with thoughts I could barely hold on to. I rushed up the stairs, 2 at a time, slamming the door behind me. I threw my helmet on the couch and paced the room, my mind racing. I needed a plan, something that would hit hard, something that would make her feel even a fraction of what I was feeling. I grabbed my laptop and sat at the kitchen table, my hands still trembling. I opened the video file I'd recorded on my phone, watched a few seconds of it, and felt my stomach churn. It was real. I had proof. Proof of everything. The evidence stared back at me. Every kiss, every touch, every goddamn smile. I closed the file and leaned back, my breath coming in shallow bursts. What next? What could I do to make her pay? 1,000 ideas flashed through my mind, each more vicious than the last. But one stood out, one that made me pause, made my heart race just a bit faster. I could send the video to her family, to our friends, to everyone who mattered. Expose her for what she was. Let them see her true face, her deceit, Her betrayal. I opened my email and started drafting a message. I kept it short, just a few lines, cold and direct. I attached the video file, the cursor hovering over the send button. My finger trembled, hesitating for a brief second. Once I hit send, there was no going back. I would cross a line that couldn't be uncrossed. But what did it matter now? She had crossed it first. I pressed send. The message flew out into the digital ether, carrying with it all my pain, my fury, my need for revenge. I felt a strange sense of satisfaction, a dark thrill coursing through my veins. I imagined the look on her face when she found out, when she realized that everyone knew, that everyone had seen. Her parents, her siblings, her friends, our friends. The shame, the humiliation. It would be unbearable. I wanted that. I needed that. The minutes ticked by, and I felt a strange calm settle over me, like the eye of a storm. The rage was still there, but now it was colder, more controlled. I took a deep breath and poured myself a drink, my hands steadier now. I would wait. I would watch as it all came crashing down around her. The phone rang. I jumped, nearly spilling the drink. I glanced at the screen. It was her. Carol. I hesitated, then answered, trying to keep my voice steady. "Hey," I said, my tone casual, almost bored. "Alex," she started, her voice trembling, on the edge of breaking. What did you do?" I smiled, taking a sip of my drink. "What do you mean, Carol?" "Don't play games with me," she snapped, her voice rising, breaking. "I know what you did. The video. You sent it to everyone, my parents, my friends. How could you?" I let her words wash over me, felt a dark satisfaction rising. How could I? Really, Carol? After what I saw today? After what you did? There was a silence on the line, a heavy, painful silence. I could hear her breathing, could imagine the tears streaming down her face, the panic in her eyes. "Please, Alex," she whispered finally, her voice small, broken. "Please don't do this. We can fix this." I laughed, a bitter sound that cut through the silence. "Fix this? You think we can fix this? After everything? After him?" "I made a mistake," she pleaded. I was lonely. I didn't know how to talk to you anymore. I didn't mean for it to go this far. Please, Alex, I'm begging you. Don't destroy me like this." I felt a flicker of something, doubt, regret. I wasn't sure, but I shoved it down. I couldn't let her off that easy. "You destroyed us first, Carol," I said, my voice cold, unyielding. "Now you get to live with it." I hung up before she could reply, before I could hear more of her sobbing, her begging. I tossed the phone onto the couch and downed the rest of my drink in one gulp. I felt a strange emptiness, a hollow ache where the anger had been. I had done it. I had sent the tape. But instead of feeling triumphant, I felt lost. What had I become? A man hell-bent on revenge? A man willing to drag everyone into the mud just to make himself feel better? I didn't recognize myself. The old Alex, the man I had been, wouldn't have done this. But the old Alex was dead, killed by Carol's lies, her betrayal. I stood there in the darkening room, the sound of my own breathing filling the silence, and I realized I had no idea what to do next. The revenge felt hollow, the satisfaction fleeting. I had made her suffer, yes, but at what cost? I sat down on the couch, my head in my hands, feeling the weight of my choices settling on my shoulders. This wasn't over. Not yet. I still had to face her, and I had no idea what I would do when I did. The fallout was swift and brutal. Carol's phone calls came first, then the texts, one after another, frantic and pleading. I ignored them all. I didn't have the strength to hear her voice, to listen to her apologies or explanations. Not yet. I shut my phone off, tossed it onto the coffee table, and poured myself another drink, hoping the alcohol would numb the ache in my chest. But the emptiness inside me seemed to grow, swallowing up every sip I took. I felt like a man stranded at sea, alone on a small boat, surrounded by nothing but dark, endless water. I had thought revenge would make me feel better, would give me some sort of closure, but instead it left me adrift, more lost than ever. I spent the rest of the day in a fog, wandering around the apartment, unable to focus on anything. The silence was deafening. I kept glancing at the phone, half expecting it to light up again, but nothing came. I knew why. By now, the damage was done. Her family would have seen the video, our friends, the people she cared about. They would know what she had done. By the next morning, the calls began again, this time from our friends. My phone buzzed incessantly. I finally picked up one call, from John, a mutual friend who had been close to us for years. His voice was low and careful. "Alex, man, what the hell happened?" he asked, sounding half concerned, half bewildered. "What do you think happened, John?" I replied, my tone colder than I intended. "You saw the video, didn't you?" He paused, as if searching for the right words. "Yeah, I saw it. We all did. But are you sure you wanted to do it that way? I mean, sending it to everyone, I don't know, man. It feels heavy." Heavy. That word hung in the air like a lead weight. I wanted to snap at him, to tell him he had no idea what it felt like to be betrayed like that, to have your life torn apart by someone you trusted. But I swallowed it down. "Yeah, well," I muttered. "She made her bed, didn't she?" "Maybe," he replied softly. "But you're still sleeping in it too, you know?" I clenched my jaw, feeling my anger flare again. "I didn't ask for your judgment, John," I shot back. "If you're calling to defend her, you can save your breath." "I'm not defending anyone, Alex," he said, his voice calm, measured. I'm worried about you, that's all. You're not yourself lately. You haven't been for a long time." "I'm fine," I lied, knowing it sounded hollow even to my own ears. "I'm dealing with it." Another pause. "All right," he said finally, with a sigh. "If you need anything, just call, okay? Don't shut us all out." I hung up without replying, feeling a knot tighten in my stomach. His words cut deeper than I wanted to admit. I had thought exposing Carol's betrayal would feel like winning a battle, but instead, it felt like I was losing myself in the process. I'd wanted her to feel pain, to suffer like I was suffering. But now, I wasn't so sure. The next call came from her father. I let it ring, watching the screen, feeling a pang of guilt. He had always been kind to me, had welcomed me into their family with open arms. What would he say now, knowing what I had done? But I couldn't bring myself to answer. I wasn't ready to hear his voice, wasn't ready to face the disappointment and anger I knew would be there. By midday, I'd had enough. I threw on a jacket and left the apartment, slamming the door behind me. I needed air, needed to get away from the suffocating walls, the noise of my own thoughts echoing in my head. I found myself wandering down to the park nearby, where the city's noise felt a little more distant, a little more bearable. I sat on a bench, staring at the people passing by, parents with children, couples holding hands, joggers lost in their own world. And then, out of nowhere, I saw her, Pam. She was walking toward me, her face a mix of surprise and concern. I hadn't seen her since the bookstore closed a few weeks back. She'd always been kind, always made an effort to talk to me, even when I'd been cold, distant. I didn't want to see her now, didn't want to answer her questions, but it was too late. She'd spotted me, her steps quickening as she approached. "Alex?" she called out, her voice soft, tentative. "Are you okay?" I looked away, wishing I could vanish, but she was already there, standing in front of me. "I'm fine," I mumbled, keeping my gaze fixed on the ground. She sat down next to me, close, but not too close, like she was trying to respect my space. "You don't look fine," she said gently. I heard what happened about the video. I stiffened, feeling a wave of embarrassment, of shame. Yeah, well, it's none of your business, Pam, I muttered, my tone harsher than I intended. She flinched, but didn't back down. I know it's not, but I care about you, Alex. I've seen the way you've been lately, angry, distant. This isn't you. What do you know about me? I snapped, turning to face her, my anger flaring up again. You don't know what it feels like to be betrayed like that. To have everything you thought you knew about someone ripped away in an instant. She nodded, her expression soft, understanding. You're right, I don't. But I know that holding on to all this anger, this need for revenge, it's not going to help you. It's only going to eat you alive. I looked away, her words cutting through me like a knife. I need to do this, I muttered, more to myself than to her. I need her to know what she did, to feel it. And then what? She asked quietly. What happens after that, Alex? Do you think you'll feel any better? Or will you just keep losing pieces of yourself one by one? I had no answer. I didn't want to admit that she might be right. That maybe, just maybe, the revenge wasn't making me feel whole again. It was just breaking me down even more. But I couldn't face that truth, not yet. Thanks for the advice, I said, my voice cold, distant. But I've got to handle this my way. Pam sighed, a sad smile crossing her lips. I hope you figure it out, Alex, she said softly. I really do. I watched her walk away, feeling an ache in my chest, a sense of something slipping away. She was right, in a way. I was losing myself, bit by bit, to this anger, this darkness, but I wasn't ready to let it go. Not yet. Not until Carol knew what she'd done. Not until she felt every ounce of pain she'd caused. The days blurred together after that. Each one felt like I was wading through thick, heavy fog, with every step taking me deeper into a place I didn't recognize. I couldn't remember the last time I had slept properly, the last time I had felt anything close to peace. I wandered the apartment like a ghost, avoiding my own reflection, unable to face the hollow-eyed stranger staring back at me from the mirror. I went back to the bookstore once or twice, trying to lose myself in the shelves, in the comfort of routine, but it didn't work. Nothing did. The anger had settled deep inside me, like a stone that wouldn't shift. The looks I got from my coworkers, the way they whispered when they thought I wasn't listening, it grated on me, made my skin itch. I knew they'd all seen the video by now. I saw it in their eyes, the pity, the judgment. I didn't need their sympathy. I didn't even know what I needed anymore. Pam stopped by once. I was in the back, pretending to sort through inventory, when she appeared in the doorway, her expression uncertain. I felt a mix of relief and irritation at seeing her again, this woman who seemed to care too much, who saw too much. Hey, she said softly, leaning against the doorframe, her voice breaking the silence. I brought you some coffee. Thought you might need it. I nodded, not looking at her. Thanks, I muttered, keeping my eyes on the stacks of books. I didn't want to talk. I didn't want to hear any more of her well-meaning advice. I just wanted to be left alone. Pam stepped closer, setting the coffee down on the table next to me. I've been thinking about what you said, about needing her to feel the pain, she began, choosing her words carefully. I get it, Alex. I do. But sometimes holding on to all this anger, it just... I cut her off, my voice sharper than I intended. I don't need a lecture, Pam. I know what I'm doing. She sighed, folding her arms across her chest. Do you? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're falling apart. I finally looked up at her, meeting her gaze. Maybe I am, I said, my voice hollow. But what else is there? Tell me that. What the hell else is there for me now? She shook her head slowly, sadness in her eyes. There's moving on, Alex. There's finding a way to let go of the past, to let go of her. I laughed bitterly. Let go? After what she did? How can you even say that? Pam took a deep breath, her face softening. Because holding on to it like this, it's only hurting you. It's only keeping you trapped in a place where you can't heal. I know it's not easy, but you have to find a way out, or you're going to destroy yourself. I looked away, feeling something twist in my chest. I didn't want to hear this. I didn't want to face the truth she was trying to show me. Just leave me alone, Pam, I muttered, my voice breaking slightly. I don't need your pity. She hesitated, then nodded slowly. Okay, Alex. But I'm here if you ever want to talk, if you ever want something more than this. I didn't respond. I just watched as she turned and walked away, feeling that familiar ache in my chest, that sense of something slipping through my fingers. I knew she was right, in some way, but I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready to let go. Not yet. The rest of the day passed in a haze. I went through the motions, shelving books, helping customers, but my mind was elsewhere. I kept thinking about Carol, about the video, about the way she had sounded on the phone, her voice trembling with desperation. I wondered what she was doing now, how she was coping with the fallout. I didn't have to wonder for long. That evening, as I was getting ready to leave, I saw her. Carol. She was standing outside the bookstore, her eyes red and swollen, her hair disheveled. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. My heart twisted in my chest, a mix of anger and something else, something I didn't want to admit. She saw me and hurried over, her face crumpling into a mix of relief and fear. Alex, she breathed, her voice raw, pleading. Please, can we talk? I didn't move, didn't say a word. I just stared at her, taking in the wreckage of the woman I had once loved. She looked broken, lost. But I didn't feel pity. I didn't feel anything. Please, she whispered, stepping closer. I know you hate me. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I need to talk to you. I need to explain. What is there to explain, Carol? I asked, my voice flat, emotionless. I saw everything I needed to see. I heard enough on the phone. She flinched as if I'd struck her. I made a mistake, she said, her voice breaking. I was lonely, Alex. You were always so distant, so angry. I felt like I was losing you, like I didn't matter anymore. I laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. So you decided to fuck someone else? That was your solution? Her face crumpled, tears spilling down her cheeks. I'm sorry, she sobbed. I know I hurt you. I know I ruined everything, but I'm begging you, Alex. Please, don't make me out to be some kind of monster. I was lost. I didn't know how to reach you anymore. I felt my jaw tighten, my fists clenching at my sides. Don't make you out to be a monster. What about me, Carol? What about what you did to me? She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I know, and I'm so sorry, but this isn't you, Alex. Sending that video, hurting everyone like that. It's not who you are. You don't get to decide who I am, I snapped, my voice rising. You lost that right the moment you betrayed me. She reached out, trying to touch my arm, but I pulled back, recoiling from her touch like it burned. Please, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I'm begging you, let's just talk. Let's just try to understand each other again. I stared at her, feeling a storm of emotions surging inside me. Anger, pain, confusion, and something else, something that felt like exhaustion. I don't know if I can, I muttered, my voice trembling. I don't know if I want to. She nodded, a flicker of hope in her eyes. Please, just think about it, okay? For both of us. For the sake of what we had. I turned away, unable to look at her any longer. I don't know, Carol, I whispered. I just don't know. As I walked away, I felt her gaze on my back, felt the weight of her words pressing down on me. The truth was, I didn't know what I wanted anymore. I didn't know if I could forgive her, if I could ever look at her the same way again. But I also didn't know if I could keep living like this, trapped in my own anger and pain. I felt the wind against my face, the chill cutting through me like a blade. I had a choice to make, and I didn't know which path to take. Not yet. The days that followed were a blur of confusion and torment. I'd thought that confronting Carol would give me some kind of clarity, but all it did was stir up a storm of emotions that I didn't know how to handle. Anger, hurt, guilt. They all collided inside me, twisting my thoughts into knots. I felt like I was caught in a riptide, pulled in different directions, unsure of where the current would take me. I stayed away from home as much as I could, wandering the city streets late into the night, riding the Harley with no destination, just to feel the wind on my face, the roar of the engine beneath me. Anything to drown out the noise in my head, the relentless questions. What did I want? Did I even want anything anymore? Or was I just drifting, looking for something to hold on to, some purpose that felt solid under my feet? Pam tried to reach out again, but I avoided her calls, her texts. I couldn't face her now, couldn't bear her kindness. She reminded me too much of what I was losing, what I was throwing away with each step deeper into the darkness. I didn't want to hear her voice, didn't want to see the concern in her eyes, the gentle way she tried to coax me back from the edge. I wasn't ready to be saved. Then, one evening, as I sat alone in a darkened bar, nursing a drink that had long since lost its burn, my phone rang. Not Pam this time, not Carol. It was a number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. "Hello?" I muttered, my voice low, rough from lack of sleep. "Is this Alex?" A man's voice, unfamiliar, tense. "Alex, it's Jason." For a moment, I didn't know how to react. Jason. Him. The man in the video. The man who had been with my wife. My grip tightened on the phone, my knuckles turning white. "What the hell do you want?" I spat, feeling my anger flare hot and fierce. I need to talk to you," he said quickly, his voice strained, nervous. "Please, just hear me out. It's important." "What could you possibly have to say to me?" I growled, feeling the urge to hang up, to end this now before I lost control. "You've done enough damage already." I know, he replied, his voice shaking. "But I swear I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I didn't know Carol was married, okay? Not at first. And when I found out, she said things were over between you two, that it was all but done." I felt a cold fury settle in my gut. "So that makes it okay, does it?" I snapped. "You think that excuses what you did? What she did?" "No, I'm not saying that," he insisted. "Look, man, I'm not trying to make excuses. I didn't want you to think I was some kind of predator. I didn't go looking for this, all right? It just happened." I laughed bitterly. "Just happened? Is that supposed to make me feel better? That you two just happened to fall into bed together?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could hear him breathing, hear the hesitation in his silence. "I'm sorry, Alex," he said finally, his voice low, almost a whisper. "I'm sorry for everything. I didn't want to hurt anyone. I didn't know what else to do." I closed my eyes, feeling a wave of exhaustion wash over me. I didn't know why I was still talking to him, didn't know what I was looking for. Maybe I just wanted to hear it from him, to hear his guilt, his shame, to make it real. "What do you want, Jason?" I asked, my voice flat, tired. "Why are you calling me?" I wanted you to know the truth," he said quietly, "and to tell you that I'm done. It's over. I'm staying away from Carol. You won't see me again, I promise. I don't want to cause any more pain. His words hung in the air, a strange mix of relief and resentment settling in my chest. "It's too late for that," I muttered. "The damage is already done." "I know," he whispered. "I'm sorry." I hung up, unable to listen to him anymore, his apologies ringing hollow in my ears. I slammed the phone down on the bar, my hands trembling. What the hell was I doing? Why was I letting this tear me apart, letting them tear me apart? I felt the anger rise again, a hot, pulsing wave that threatened to overwhelm me. I needed to do something, anything, to take back control. I left the bar, the cool night air hitting my face, sobering me just enough to clear my head. I walked for what felt like hours, my thoughts churning, my heart pounding. I didn't know where I was going until I found myself outside Carol's apartment. The lights were on inside, a faint glow spilling out from behind the curtains. I stood there, staring up at the window, my breath fogging in the cold air. I should turn around. I should walk away, go back to my empty apartment, and let this end. But I couldn't. I felt a pull, a need to confront her again, to see her face, to hear her voice. Maybe I was looking for closure, or maybe I was just looking for a fight. I took a deep breath and walked up to the door, knocking loudly. A few moments later, I heard her footsteps, soft and hesitant, before the door creaked open. She stood there, looking at me with wide, surprised eyes, her face pale and drawn. "Alex," she breathed, her voice a mixture of relief and fear. "What are you doing here?" "I needed to see you," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "We need to talk." She nodded slowly, stepping aside to let me in. I walked past her, into the familiar living room that now felt so foreign, so empty. She closed the door behind me, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence was thick, heavy with everything we weren't saying. "Jason called me," I said finally, breaking the silence. "He told me he's done, that it's over between you two." She nodded, her hands twisting nervously in front of her. "It is. I ended it. I swear, Alex, I ended it." I shook my head, a bitter smile tugging at my lips. "Why should I believe you, Carol?" "Why should I believe anything you say?" She flinched, tears filling her eyes. "Because I'm telling you the truth," she whispered. "I know I've lied, I know I've hurt you, but I'm not lying now. It's over. I want to fix this. If it can be fixed." I felt a lump form in my throat, my chest tightening. "You think this can be fixed? After everything you've done?" She nodded, a desperate hope flickering in her eyes. "I don't know, Alex, but I want to try. I want to try to make things right. Please, just give me a chance." I looked at her, searching her face for something, anything that would make this easier, that would make sense of it all. But all I saw was the same woman I had once loved, the same woman who had betrayed me. I felt my resolve weakening, felt the anger giving way to something softer, something more fragile. "I don't know if I can, Carol," I whispered, my voice breaking. "I don't know if I can ever look at you the same way again." She stepped closer, reaching out to touch my arm, her hand warm against my skin. "Please," she murmured. "Please just think about it. Don't shut me out, Alex. Don't let this be the end." I pulled away, shaking my head. "I don't know what I want anymore," I said, my voice hollow. "I don't know if I can ever forgive you, or if I even want to." She nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I understand," she whispered. "But I'll be here, waiting, hoping that maybe, just maybe, you'll find it in your heart to try." I turned and walked out, the door clicking shut behind me. I felt the weight of her words pressing down on me, felt the ache in my chest growing stronger. I had no answers, no direction. I was lost, adrift in a sea of my own pain and doubt, unsure of which way to turn. But one thing was certain. I couldn't keep living like this. Something had to change. I just didn't know how to find the way back. The days dragged by in a haze of confusion and numbness. Every morning, I woke up with a heaviness in my chest, a weight that seemed to press down harder with each passing hour. I felt like I was moving in slow motion, trapped in a cycle that I couldn't break free from. I was stuck between anger and sorrow, between wanting revenge and craving something I couldn't even name anymore. I avoided the bookstore, avoided Pam and anyone else who tried to reach out to me. I didn't want their sympathy, their pity. I didn't want their advice, their kind words. I didn't even know what I wanted. To be left alone, maybe, to figure out what to do with this mess that had become my life. I barely ate, barely slept. I just drifted through the days, waiting for something, anything, to make sense again. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, heart pounding, images of Carol and Jason flashing behind my eyes like a never-ending loop. I could hear their laughter, see their bodies entwined, feel the betrayal like a physical wound that refused to heal. I'd lie there in the darkness, staring up at the ceiling, wondering how I'd let it come to this, how I'd let myself get dragged down so far. One night, after too many hours of tossing and turning, I grabbed my keys and left the apartment, unable to stand the silence, the emptiness. I found myself back on the Harley, the engine rumbling beneath me as I tore through the streets, the city lights blurring around me like streaks of color against the black night. I rode aimlessly, my thoughts racing faster than the bike could carry me. I ended up outside Pam's apartment, the place I'd promised myself I wouldn't go, but I was too tired to think clearly, too tired to care. I needed someone who wasn't part of this nightmare, someone who didn't make me feel like I was coming apart at the seams. I stood there for a long time, staring up at her window, trying to find the courage to knock, to ask for something I wasn't sure she could give. Finally, I took a deep breath and knocked on the door, my heart pounding in my chest. I heard her footsteps, and then she opened the door, her expression shifting from surprise to concern the moment she saw my face. "Alex?" she said softly, stepping aside to let me in. "What's going on? It's late." I walked past her, into the small living room, feeling the warmth of the space, the coziness of it. It felt different from my cold, empty apartment, and I hated how much I needed that comfort. I just needed to see you," I muttered, my voice sounding small, even to my own ears. I didn't know where else to go. Pam closed the door behind me and walked over, sitting down on the couch, her eyes never leaving my face. "What's happening, Alex?" she asked gently. "Talk to me." I sat down next to her, feeling a rush of shame, a vulnerability I didn't want to show. "I don't know," I admitted, my voice breaking. "I feel like I'm losing my mind. I can't stop thinking about it, about them. I can't stop feeling this anger, this pain. I don't know how to make it go away." She reached out, took my hand in hers, her touch warm and steady. "You don't have to do this alone," she whispered. "You don't have to keep punishing yourself like this. It's okay to feel what you're feeling, but you can't let it destroy you." I looked into her eyes, saw the kindness there, the understanding. "I don't know how to let it go," I confessed, feeling tears sting my eyes, something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in so long. "I don't know how to stop being angry." She squeezed my hand tighter, her voice soft but firm. "It's going to take time, Alex. And you have to want it. You have to want to let go, to move forward, to forgive. If not her, then at least yourself." I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of her words. Could I forgive myself? Could I let go of the need to hurt Carol, to keep punishing her, and myself? I didn't know. But in that moment, sitting there with Pam, I felt something shift, something small, but real. A crack in the armor I had built around myself, a flicker of light in the darkness. "Stay," she said, her voice gentle, almost pleading. "Stay here tonight. You shouldn't be alone. Not now. I nodded, too tired to argue, too tired to keep pretending I didn't need help. Okay, I whispered. Just for tonight. She led me to the spare room, handed me a blanket, and smiled softly. If you need anything, I'm here, she said, before closing the door behind her. I lay down on the bed, the exhaustion finally catching up with me, pulling me under. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt a sliver of peace, a sense of something shifting inside me, something loosening its grip. Maybe it was the comfort of being near someone who cared, someone who wasn't part of the pain. Maybe it was just the simple act of not being alone. The next morning, I woke to the smell of coffee brewing, the sun streaming through the window. I felt a little clearer, a little less weighed down. Pam was in the kitchen pouring coffee into 2 mugs, and she smiled when she saw me. "How did you sleep?" she asked, handing me a cup. "Better," I admitted, taking a sip, feeling the warmth spread through me. "Thank you for letting me stay." She nodded, her smile soft. "Anytime, Alex. Anytime you need it." I wanted to say more, to tell her how much it meant, how much her kindness had kept me from falling apart completely. But I didn't know how. I just nodded, grateful for the silence, the comfort of her presence. After a while I left, promising her I'd call, that I'd try to figure things out. But as I rode back home, I felt that familiar heaviness creeping back in, the doubts, the anger, the questions that never seemed to have answers. When I reached my apartment, I found a note stuck to the door. I recognized Carol's handwriting immediately. My hand trembled as I pulled it off, reading the short, hastily scrawled message. "Alex, I'm sorry. I know you hate me, but I need to talk to you one more time. Please, just one more chance to explain. I'll be at the park, our spot this afternoon. If you don't come, I'll understand. But I hope you will. Carol." I crumpled the note in my hand, my heart pounding. A part of me wanted to throw it away, to walk back inside and pretend I'd never seen it. But another part, the part that was tired of feeling lost, tired of the darkness, wanted to know what she had to say, wanted to find some kind of ending to this nightmare. I didn't know what I'd do, didn't know if I could handle hearing more excuses, more apologies, but I felt a strange pull, a need to go, to face her one last time. Maybe it would be closure, maybe it would be more pain. I wasn't sure, but I knew I had to find out. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows as I made my way to the park, my heart thudding in my chest. Our spot. It felt like a lifetime ago since we'd first found it. A quiet corner by the lake, a place we used to escape to when the world felt too heavy, when we needed to breathe. It had been a sanctuary once. Now it felt like a battlefield. I didn't know what to expect. Maybe I was hoping for some kind of explanation that would make sense of it all, that would somehow make it easier to understand. But deep down, I knew there was no explanation, no words that could erase what she'd done. Still, something had pulled me here, something that felt like unfinished business, like a wound that needed to be cleaned no matter how much it hurt. As I approached, I saw her sitting on the bench, her head bowed, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She looked up when she heard my footsteps, her face pale, eyes red-rimmed. For a moment, we just stared at each other, the silence stretching between us like a chasm. "Thank you for coming," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, keeping my distance, my arms crossed over my chest. "You wanted to talk," I said, my voice flat, guarded. "So talk." She took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly. "I don't know where to start," she began, her eyes searching mine for something. Understanding. Forgiveness. I wasn't sure. "I know I've said it before, but I'm so sorry, Alex. For everything. For hurting you. For lying. I know I've lost your trust, and I don't expect to get it back. but I need you to understand why. I felt a surge of anger rise in me. Why? I repeated, my voice tinged with bitterness. What could possibly justify what you did, Carol? What could make it okay? She shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes. I'm not trying to justify it, she said, her voice breaking. I'm just trying to make you see how lost I was, how lost I still am. I felt like I was disappearing, Alex, like you were drifting further and further away, and I didn't know how to reach you. I laughed, a harsh, empty sound. So you decided to cheat? That was your solution? She flinched, wiping a tear from her cheek. No. It wasn't a solution. It was a mistake. A terrible, awful mistake. I know that now, but at the time, I was so lonely, so desperate. I didn't know what else to do. Didn't know what else to do? I shot back, my voice rising. You could have talked to me, Carol. You could have tried to fix things. Instead, you chose to destroy them. Her shoulders sagged, her head dropping. I know, she whispered. I know I failed. I failed you. I failed us. And I have to live with that. I felt my chest tighten, my hands clenching into fists. I didn't want to feel pity for her. I didn't want to feel anything. But I could see the pain in her eyes, the regret, the guilt that weighed on her shoulders like a heavy cloak. I don't know if I can forgive you, I said, my voice softer now, more uncertain. I don't know if I even want to. She looked up at me, her eyes filled with a mix of hope and fear. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Alex, she replied. I'm asking for a chance to try and make things right. I know I can't erase what happened, but I want to try. I want to try to find a way back, if you'll let me. I turned away, staring out at the lake, the water glinting in the fading light. A part of me wanted to walk away, to end this now and never look back. But another part, a part I hadn't allowed myself to feel for so long, wondered if there was still something worth salvaging, if there was still a way out of this wreckage. What makes you think I could ever trust you again? I asked, my voice thick with emotion. What makes you think I could ever look at you and not see him, not see what you did? She stepped closer, her voice trembling. I don't know, she admitted. I don't know if you can. But I'm willing to try, to do whatever it takes if you are. I still love you, Alex. Despite everything, I still love you. I closed my eyes, feeling a wave of emotion wash over me. Anger, sadness, longing, all tangled together in a knot that I couldn't untangle. I wanted to scream, to shout at her, to push her away. But I also wanted to reach out, to hold her, to feel something other than this emptiness. I don't know if I can, I whispered, barely able to get the words out. I don't know if I'm strong enough to try. She reached out, her hand brushing against mine, a tentative touch that sent a shiver down my spine. You don't have to decide now, she said softly. Just think about it. Think about us, about what we had, about what we could still have. I turned to face her, our eyes locking. I saw the tears streaming down her face, the desperation in her gaze. I saw the woman I had loved, the woman who had betrayed me, and I felt something shift inside me, something that I couldn't quite define. Maybe, I said finally, my voice steady but uncertain. Maybe I'll think about it. But don't expect miracles, Carol. Don't expect me to just forget. She nodded, a small, hopeful smile breaking through her tears. I don't expect you to forget, she whispered. I just hope. I hope you'll remember what we had, and maybe we can find a way back to each other. I turned away, feeling the weight of her words pressing down on me. I didn't know if I could forgive her, didn't know if I could ever let go of the anger, the hurt. But for the first time, I felt a flicker of something different, something that felt like the faintest glimmer of hope. I'll think about it, I repeated, more to myself than to her. She nodded, wiping her eyes, her voice barely audible. "Thank you," she whispered. "That's all I ask." I turned and walked away, my heart pounding, my mind racing. I didn't know where this would lead, didn't know if I could ever trust her again, or if I even wanted to try. But I knew one thing. I was tired of living in the dark, tired of feeling like I was drowning in my own pain. As I walked away from the park, I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me, a quiet whisper in the back of my mind that maybe, just maybe, there was a way out of this, a way to find peace, to find something that felt like a new beginning. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was ready to face it. I walked for a long time after leaving the park. The sun had dipped below the horizon, leaving only a faint glow on the edges of the sky. The city felt different in the twilight, quieter somehow, as if it was holding its breath, waiting to see what I would do next. My mind was a jumble of thoughts and emotions, none of them making much sense. Carol's words kept echoing in my head. "I still love you. I want to try." I couldn't stop hearing them, couldn't stop feeling the tremor in her voice, the desperate hope in her eyes. Part of me wanted to believe her, to believe that there was still something worth saving. But another part, the part that had been ripped open by her betrayal, wanted to shut it all out, to slam the door on that chapter of my life and never look back. I found myself standing in front of my apartment building, staring at the door, my hand hovering over the handle. I hesitated, thinking about the empty rooms inside, the silence that would greet me, the familiar weight pressing down on my chest. I thought about Pam, about her offer to be there for me, to help me find a way out of the darkness. And I thought about Carol, waiting for an answer, waiting for a sign that there was still a chance, still a way forward. I felt a deep, bone-weary exhaustion settle over me. I was so tired of the anger, so tired of the endless cycle of blame and hurt. I didn't know if I could forgive her, but I knew I couldn't keep living like this, trapped in a prison of my own making, locked away with nothing but my pain. I turned away from the door and pulled out my phone. My hands shook as I scrolled through my contacts, hovering over Carol's name. I took a deep breath, closed my eyes, and hit the call button. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times before she picked up. "Alex?" Her voice was small, uncertain, filled with hope and fear. "I've been thinking," I began, my voice steady, calm. "I've been thinking a lot, and I don't know if I can ever forgive you, Carol. I don't know if I can ever forget what you did, how much you hurt me, but I'm tired. I'm tired of feeling this way, tired of letting it consume me." She was silent for a moment, and I could hear her breath catch on the other end of the line. "I understand," she whispered. "I know I've asked for a lot, and I know it might be too much. I don't know what I want," I admitted, my voice raw, honest. "But I think I'm ready to try, to see if there's a way to rebuild, to find something worth holding on to." She let out a soft, shaky breath, a sound that was half a sob, half a laugh. "Thank you," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "Thank you for giving me a chance. I promise I won't waste it." "I'm not making any promises," I replied, my tone firm, but not unkind. "I'm not saying things will go back to the way they were. They can't. But maybe we can find a way forward. Maybe we can learn to live with what happened and find a way to be better, together or apart." She nodded. Even though I couldn't see her, I could feel it. "I want that too," she said softly. "Whatever it takes, Alex, I'm willing to do it." I felt a weight lift from my shoulders, not completely gone, but lighter somehow. "All right," I said. "Let's take it slow. Let's see where this goes." We said our goodbyes, and I hung up, staring at the phone in my hand, feeling a strange sense of peace settle over me. I didn't know what the future held. I didn't know if I could ever truly forgive her, if I could ever feel the way I once did. But I was willing to try, willing to see if there was a way to heal, a way to move past the pain. I stood there for a moment longer, feeling the night air cool against my skin, and then I made another call, this time to Pam. She answered on the first ring, her voice warm, welcoming. "Hey, Pam," I said, a small smile tugging at my lips. "Do you have a minute? I could use some company." "Of course," she replied without hesitation. "Come over. I'll put on some coffee." I felt the warmth of her words seep into me, a comfort I hadn't felt in so long. "I'll be there soon," I said, and hung up, feeling a flicker of hope, of possibility. Maybe things wouldn't be perfect. Maybe they'd never be the same. But for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt like I had a choice, a way forward that didn't involve drowning in my own anger and pain. I had people who cared, people who were willing to stand by me, and that was more than enough to start with. I got on my Harley, feeling the familiar rumble of the engine beneath me, and took a deep breath. The road ahead was uncertain, but it was mine. I would find my own way through, one step, one day at a time, and for now, that was enough.